Welcome to the Daily Flow. Please welcome your host, John Coleman.
Hello everyone. Happy Monday, as they say. Today we're going to talk about how UX, user experience research, or discovery work, how that's represented on a Kanban board. On a Kanban board, as a lot of you probably know, work items on the board, as in the cards on the board, typically move from the left-hand side of the board to the right-hand side of the board. And you don't really have a work item going backwards on a board. There's a couple of reasons why you might have work items going backwards on a board, which I won't go into today, but it's generally not good practice for work items to move backwards on the board. So what happens then when you've got work like UX, which really is never finished? UX is never finished, really. Do you have cards ping-ponging all over the place, all across the Kanban board? I don't know. So let's talk about that today and see if we can look at some options. I think the first thing I'd like to make you aware of is the truth curve by GIF Constable. And this is published, I believe, in 2013. I think you go to gifconstable.com, you just search GIF's name, and you'll see the truth curve. And it's got two axes. So just imagine you've got a horizontal axis where you've got the level of effort to do something, the level of experiments, the level of effort into doing an experiment or even to building the whole thing. And then imagine a vertical axis where the believability of the information, the level of evidence that we're acquiring. If you don't talk to a customer, then really the believability of the information isn't up to much, is it? You're kind of in fantasy land as well if you're not really making the effort to just talk to a customer. So the assumption is that the more we go through our work, the more effort we put in, we should really be trying to build up some evidence that we're on the right track. And so very roughly, you could have some kind of super linear line going through that graph that starts around the 45-degree point, but not quite, and then kind of builds up steadily, and then builds super linearly. So when you've built the whole thing, where you've done loads of effort, you should have lots of evidence that you're building the right thing. And to get that evidence, you probably should have been doing some lower cost experiments earlier on the truth curve to really discover whether you're on the right track. I often ask people if they could just tell me the product development that they're working on at the moment, in terms of how much evidence have they built up for that what they're doing is on the right track. And a lot of the time, I get people marking an X under the super linear line. In other words, they really gambled a lot of money that they were building the right thing. And as I say in Ireland, you need to get out the holy water, hoping that you actually did deliver the right thing, because we really don't know how valuable your piece of product development is until we actually get some feedback from customers and end users. And as Steve Blank says, no business plan survives the first interaction with the customer. So it's really important to do lots of discovery work early. So for example, if we're building a game, I've no really experience of building computer games, but I would imagine that there's a lot of art work that needs to be done at the start and building the scenes and the storyboards and all that. You could probably do some paper prototyping with people. They're not playing the game, but imagine you had a scene like this and tell them that you need to shoot, metaphorically in the game, shoot this person or whatever. What would they do? What were they looking for? And so you see how people are reacting. You could start off with very low cost experiments and then build something a bit more high fidelity, even in PowerPoint, for example. It just looks like it's working, but it's not really not. And then slowly you're building up to something, maybe even Wizard of Oz. It looks like it's working, but it's not really. There's a lot of manual stuff going on in the background. And eventually, when you've got built up enough data, you kind of build the whole thing. Now, I'm not saying that you need to use UX every single time. There's some things where you just got loads of evidence, you should just build it, and that's it, because there's loads of value. If there's loads of value, of course, you should build it. But when it's a bit risky that the value is there, that's really where user experience research really, really helps. What I'm not talking about today is UX people just providing UI widgets, as in user experience widgets, assets, graphic assets, and so on. I'm not talking about that because UX goes way beyond that. And I guess I'm talking as well about a situation where we really want to get good outcomes. So let's look at some potential Kanban board designs, shall we? And let's see what you think. Let's try to, in an audio way, try to figure out what they might look like. So imagine a situation where you had two separate Kanban boards, one for delivery and one for discovery. And the two boards, very, very simple, more or less like to do, doing, done, pretty much. Except the done for discovery might be ready for delivery or something like that. And so you've got two separate boards and everybody's kind of happy in a sense that they've got the work separated. The problems, though, that I see with that is, number one, the level of empathy between the delivery folks and the discovery folks in terms of their work is kind of low. The delivery people don't appreciate the amount of work that goes into the discovery piece. They don't understand, maybe, and equally maybe the other way around, because they're not talking to each other on a day-to-day basis. They're kind of staying in their separate silos and not really sure that's a sensible thing. So you get reduced empathy, and then the side effect of that is you get reduced transparency. So we really don't know when our stuff is going to be done, really, because we got people working probably in different backlogs. If you're using Scrum, for example, in Scrum at UX, we don't recommend that you have one backlog and everything's in the one backlog. So reduce transparency, and also the level of delusion might go up as well. So we're kind of doing lots of stuff, but really we're not really integrating what's going on. So in Jeff Patton's paper, Dual Track Agile, and David Denham did a great blog post as well last year on this, and I've included that in the description of this today. He's done a great talk of that. So dual track agile is often misunderstood, and so really what we want to be doing is trying to integrate the discovery and delivery work. So that's option number one. I'm not a huge fan of separate boards. Okay, so let's imagine another situation where actually you use the same board, but you kind of had different colors for the different types of work. So imagine you had black for delivery work and red for UX work. So you'd have red cards and black cards on the backlog, same in the to-do column, same in progress, same in the shipped column. I guess what would be a bit better about this is at least everything's in the same board. I think as well, to be fair, there will probably be less execution bias. So execution bias is where you keep doing what you said you do because that's what you said you would do, instead of, oh, I've actually learned something new and we've got some new insights now, so therefore we should do something different. So a discovery item kind of gets to the end of the workflow here. Maybe this is key, really. Not every item, in fact, I would say most items that go through discovery probably will not be delivered, because we will hopefully build up some evidence that we shouldn't build them because people don't want them. We know from the chaos report time and time again that 2/3 of features are rarely or never used. So we're trying to reduce that by doing lots more experimentation. And at least I think we're reducing the execution bias. The level of transparency is going up, the level of empathy is going up. And I think as well, we have a better kind of sense. But the only thing is, when the UX work gets through, does that start new work that goes through the system all over again? Not sure about how we synchronize the work. When someone asks us, when will it be done? And when it's an almost impossible question to answer anyway, it's more difficult to read that from even though you've got one set for all, if you like, there's still room for improvement, I think. So that'd be that option. And then another option would be that you'd kind of have some of the items on your board. Let's say you had a board that you had like a backlog, and then maybe there's some kind of design, analysis, research column. In other words, it could be either of those. And then you've got some kind of delivery column with maybe two sub-columns, queue and in progress, because maybe when something's finished design isn't necessarily going to be delivered straight away. There might be some queue to get into delivery actually to get it done. And then you see the work has been shipped. And then maybe what we should be doing anyway, we should always be thinking about outcomes when we're looking at user experience research. And so we look at customer outcomes, user outcomes, even business outcomes. And you could have some columns also for reviewing the outcomes. maybe divide that up into 3 subcolumns: queue, in progress, and done. So that's stuff that we built up loads of evidence, but actually in the end, did we get some value actually? So in this situation, you might have some items that are pure delivery. You might have some items that are pure discovery, like just doing some paper prototype or some experiment. You might have other items that are a bit more blended. Maybe you're doing some Wizard of Oz stuff. You're building some website or some app. It looks like it's working, but there's actually a lot of stuff missing. Or there could even be a simple landing page or a fake door or something like that. So, but what you can do is you can blend the items. And when they're blended, maybe you can add a little token to the work item, or maybe have different coloring to show that there's a bit more going on. I think the advantage of this design would be you'd have more user focus, more customer focus, more transparency, more empathy as well in terms of each other's work, because we can see, oh, I didn't know you had to do all those ethnographic studies, and I didn't know you had to meet so many customers, and I didn't know you had to do that many interviews, and developers maybe actually attending, maybe just witnessing some customer interviews. So their level of empathy for the customer increases. I think the downside of this approach, though, would be the work item size would tend to get bigger. And I think also to have blended items like this, it does require more goal orientation within the team. So if you're still in a team where it's kind of like, I'm all right, Jack, and I'm doing my thing, you're doing yours, not really goal oriented as a team, then you might struggle with this. So getting to goal orientation, I'd suggest, would really help you. The advantage of having a blended approach is that we're working together. If there's some additional items between discovery and delivery, sometimes we actually have to go back to discovery because we realize that, we built up loads of evidence, but actually it turns out that, the cohort that we worked with wasn't really representative. So we actually have to go back, and do something else. So that could be tricky. So yeah, it's a bit better, but it does require a level of maturity, I would say, in the team in terms of how good you are doing that. And also, if the items are going to take longer, if you're using Scrum, for example, you need to make sure you're getting those items finished within a sprint. I think a design that I would prefer, but I'm not saying it's perfect by any means, is we just have a very simple board to doing done. You backlog before it, and the backlog would include experiments, for example, and customer interviews and all that stuff. So all those items could be in there. And the items would essentially be blended. So you would need a fair level of cooperation and goal orientation in the team. But in this case, just imagine that the doing column was broken up into, say, some swim lanes, or you could even use colors if you wanted to. But I think swim lanes would be a bit easier. And because the reality is that not every discovery item goes into delivery. Not every delivery item will result in outcomes that are really good, although I hope we're going to validate all of our outcomes. And imagine a situation then where you actually had something in validation of outcomes, and you went off, you talked to a customer, and you actually discovered, oh crap, we're in the wrong road here. So we actually need to go back to the drawing board, go back to discovery. Or imagine a situation where you're in delivery and you realize also that you're on the wrong track. You could even have a situation where you're in delivery, you realize that you're there. But more often than not, I think you want to be validating your outcomes. I think this would be a bit more sincere. I think UX is never done, really. And what I like about this is you just move the cards around the board, and it means the cards aren't moving backwards. You don't have any backflows. They're basically moving up and down within a column and just reflecting the reality that UX is never done, really. Downsides here, the cards could get quite big. But I think some advantages and appreciation that UX is never finished. More transparency, more empathy, more customer focus, and more user focus. And of course, you could also color code these by theme as well. So if there was, John Cutler talks about one-pagers. So if you have different one-pagers here, and you could even do a swim lane for those, but it makes this design more complicated. I think I prefer to use maybe color coding by epic theme, initiative, whatever it is you're trying to achieve. And the interesting though with this design though is the last column, the done column, isn't quite a done column. It's really more a learning done column, and I'm not even sure if that's right, because is learning ever done? But we've drawn the line in the sand. We've said in terms of bang for buck, we think actually this is as much money we're going to invest right now in this, and we think we're getting enough value from this, and therefore the items move into a learning done column. I'd love to hear your comments on this and any questions. That's really what I wanted to talk to you about today. I hope you found that helpful. The key thing really is that UX is never done. And I don't know, just having columns like UX, dev, test doesn't really work for me. Because what if you find something in test that needs to go back into UX? So you swim lanes up even more then, but it's getting a bit messy then when you divide it up even more. We really want to give the sense that we're collaborating as a team. And that's another key message as well. Whether you use Scrum with Kanban or whether you use, Scrum with UX or Kanban with UX, I think the approach is still the same. We still want one team. We don't really want the UXers on their own separate team in a center of excellence, which I call a center of arrogance. And I don't mean to be isolating UX people. There's lots of centers of excellence in the world, including agile ones. But I don't like them just being, because what happens is if you're in that center of excellence, there's a lack of appreciation in the teams that you're serving for all the work that you do. They don't value the work you do. And a lot of the time they think the UXers are just producing widgets, which is completely missing the point actually of what UX is all about. And also I think we want the developers to build up an appreciation as well for testing ideas with customers. Testing doesn't just mean does the code work, but is there value here? Is this worth building? And it's a comment from Eric Ries is, what is quality if you don't know who the customer is? What's the point in having perfect A to Z test scripts and all this kind of stuff if actually we don't even know if customers even want this? So if the value is risky, if you're not really sure the value is there, UX really helps you to kind of have like a heat-seeking missile to find where the value is. So anyway, they're just my ideas. There's some great blog posts as well by David Denham and John Cutler. If you want to check them out, lots of people have written about Kanban boards for UX, but I hopefully found this to be useful. Thank you so much for joining.
Got a question for us? Leave a voice message at anchor.fm/dailyflow/message and we'll feature it as well as provide you with an answer.